If you don't know this about me already, I love the Burnout games. There hasn't been another racing video game, or even a video game series as a whole, that has captured the magic of this franchise. Developers have tried to recapture that magic in Burnout's absence, but nothing can beat the real deal. Even after all these years with no new Burnout games, I say as tears are streaming down my face, I have yet to find an experience that can perfectly recreate the addictive gameplay of this franchise. Games have gotten close for me before, most notably the 2010 Need for Speed Hot Pursuit reboot / 2020 remaster. Part of the reason why that game is so close for me is because it was made by Criterion, the same development studio and people behind the Burnout games. But even then, if I had to choose between Hot Pursuit or something like Burnout Revenge, my personal favorite Burnout game, I would pick the latter. This all begs a question then. What is Burnout's magic formula? This naturally begs an answer, one that I can provide. The magic formula that Burnout has is risk and reward. Risk and reward as a gameplay mechanic wasn't new when the Burnout games were actively being released, nor is it a novel concept today. But when it comes to fast-paced arcade racing, Burnout's implementation of this is incredible. Starting from the very beginning, Burnout 1 and Burnout 2 Point of Impact can seem bare bones compared to later entries. Things like takedowns, traffic checking, aftertouch, etc. are absent, and there's a more simplified risk and reward system. For both of these games, you have to wait until your boost gauge is completely full before using it. In order to fill it, you perform things like near misses, drifting, driving in the oncoming lane, things like that. Once your boost gauge is full and you're ready, off you go. But if you continue to perform risky maneuvers on the road, when your boost ends, you'll get a head start to your next boost gauge. Or if you're risky enough out there on the roads as you're boosting, you can potentially get a refill and continue. So, while the first two games in the Burnout franchise can seem very primitive compared to later entries, the risk and reward element has been here since the very beginning. Next, let's take a look at Burnout 3 Takedown, the most transformative game in the entire franchise. As the subtitle suggests, you're now able to perform takedowns against your opponents. And let me tell you, nothing gets the dopamine levels rising quite like performing back-to-back takedowns. Your reward for performing these takedowns comes in the form of boost. Rather than needing to fill the boost gauge all the way before using it, you can use it at will. However, at the start of every event, your boost gauge is small. You're not going to be satisfying anyone with a tiny little thing like that. Luckily, performing takedowns not only refills your boost gauge, but adds some length to it. This can be done up to a 4 times boost gauge, where you've got considerable more length to work with. And while you can't make your boost gauge any larger than 4 times, look at you packing your own personal artillery cannon down there. You can still get refills with each one. And as if that wasn't enough, Criterion took a stab at navigating the unavoidable frustration of you being the one to wreck out. Whether you misjudge a corner and hit a wall, you get taken out yourself, you hit a traffic car, whatever the case may be, wrecking in a racing game is no fun. You just have to sit there for a few seconds and let your mistakes soak in before you're finally granted control again. Burnout 3 Takedown says, let's fix that. It grants you some control over your wreckage after you crash with aftertouch. By initiating aftertouch after you wreck, you can have a chance at dragging someone down with you. If you're able to steer your wreckage into an opponent, not only do you get a takedown, but you can save your boost. Under normal circumstances, when you respawn, you lose a chunk of it. You can easily earn that chunk back with another takedown after you respawn, of course, but that's still a little bit less boost for you to work with initially. By performing an aftertouch takedown, you can keep your boost fully intact when you hit the road again. That being said, the aftertouch system isn't perfect. Oftentimes, I find myself struggling to judge where I should move the stick due to rough camera angles. Every now and then, I'll get a good camera angle and be able to judge where I should steer my wreck just fine, but then other times, the angle is so rough that I'm just sitting there like, what am I even supposed to do here? So while not perfect, Burnout 3 Takedown kickstarts the great gameplay aspect of being able to recover after a crash. And again, this is where the risk and reward factor is made even greater with the aforementioned takedowns. These aspects and more would go on to be further refined and perfected in my personal favorite Burnout game, Burnout Revenge. Burnout Revenge is peak. In my opinion, it doesn't get any better than this. Not just regarding risk and reward, but literally everything else. That being said, we're not here to glaze Burnout Revenge, as one, I already did that in my review of this game, feel free to check out that video after this one, and two, we're here to focus on risk and reward. Takedowns return once more, allowing you to wreck opponents and earn boost as a result, up to a 4 times boost gauge. And while side slams, shunts, vertical takedowns, and more all work great in this game, Revenge allows you to wreck your opponents through a gameplay mechanic that I have yet to see in any other game: traffic checking. Traffic checking in Revenge allows you to shunt smaller cars facing the same direction as you out of the way. With how dense the traffic can be in this game, the ability to shunt them out of the way without wrecking is not only a godsend at times, but also super fun, particularly because you can use this gameplay mechanic to your advantage. When you fling a traffic car into an opponent's head, the rush that you feel is heavenly. However, it's important to be on the lookout for larger vehicles like semis and buses. You can't traffic check those, so if you slam into the rear of one of the larger vehicles, you'll still wreck. Aftertouch has received an improvement in the form of consistently better camera angles, allowing you to steer your wreckage more accurately. Secondly, Aftertouch has received an awesome innovation in the form of crash breakers. Crash breakers aren't new to Burnout, the mechanic having made its debut back in Burnout 3's crash mode. But in Revenge, this is the first time the mechanic can be found in race events. During the latter half of your playthrough in Revenge, events with crash breakers will become available. When you wreck or get taken out, you can choose to use up whatever boost you have left to create an explosion that could potentially net you a takedown. Or multiple of them. Not only will you keep your chunk of boost that you would have otherwise lost, you could potentially extend your boost gauge if it was looking a little small when you crashed. This means that any crashes could potentially become blessings in disguise, or at the very least you're able to pick yourself back up and get back to it as if nothing happened. That is if you manage to wreck at least one opponent. If you use your crash breaker and no one gets taken out, when you respawn, it's gonna be rough. Not only will you have lost a chunk of your boost gauge, but you'll be running on empty. This can result in a long recovery time of getting back up to speed and catching up with the rest of the pack. Therefore, it's a legitimate strategy call to hold off on using your crash breaker if you think you're not going to be able to catch anyone in the blast. Sometimes it's better to just eat the cost associated with crashing, keeping your boost to allow for a faster recovery when you respawn. Shortcuts are present in this game as well, and they can either be your best friend or your worst enemy. If you're able to maneuver your way through them, shortcuts can save you a considerable amount of time. However, at the same time, it's all too easy to crash while trying to use them, further adding on to that element of risk and reward. The game also incentivizes you to be risky on the roads with the star system. The more mayhem you cause on the roads, the faster this bar fills up. You start from a single star at the OK rank and can go all the way up to 4 stars at the awesome rank. These stars are integral to the progression in Revenge, as you need to earn them to climb the ranks and unlock new events. So not only are you incentivized to engage in the risk and reward element that's present here, it's actually mandatory if you want to progress through the game. Granted, you can say that about the other Burnout games, but you could in theory be as much of a pacifist as possible and still finish in first place, outside of things like road rage events and such. In Revenge though, being a pacifist won't get you very far. Moving on to the next entry in the series, Burnout Dominator is a very underrated game in my eyes. Dominator is essentially Burnout Greatest Hits. It combines a mixture of elements from different games in the series. Crash breakers from Burnout 3 and Revenge, the Burnout boost system from the first game and Point of Impact, and more. That being said, Dominator is able to add its own gameplay elements that make it stand out among the other entries as well. Regarding risk and reward specifically, let's focus back on the Burnout boost system again. In Dominator, there are 2 flames of boost: orange and blue. Orange is your usual boost that you can use whenever. Unlike the first 2 games, you don't need to wait for the boost gauge to be full before using it. However, as you're using that orange boost, you can't get any of it back. No matter how many drifts, near misses, takedowns, whatever, you will not get any orange boost back as you're using it. Blue boost is the high risk, high reward type. As soon as you begin using your blue boost once the gauge is full, you'll see these arrows show up. As you perform things like drifts, near misses, takedowns, etc., these arrows will turn yellow. Once all the arrows turn turn yellow, this means that once the gauge is depleted, you'll get an immediate refill and be allowed to keep boosting. If you're crazy enough out there on the roads, you can have an infinite chain of blue boosts. If you don't fill all the yellow arrows by the time you deplete your boost, you'll still get some of it back in the form of orange boost, but your chain will stop. This can result in some batshit insane situations where you barely have it together, but the rush of going so fast is just too good to let go, so you keep on pushing your luck by taking more risks, which in turn leads to another burnout chain going, and then the cycle repeats until you either win or you crash. And when you crash, not only do you have the ability to utilize aftertouch again, but crash breakers are here right from the start. Right from the beginning, you can use up whatever boost you have in reserve in order to blow your load onto your opponents. And once again, if you use the crash breaker and don't catch anyone in the blast, you'll be running on empty when you respawn. Although Revenge is my personal favorite Burnout title, if we're talking about what game does risk and reward the best, I think I have to hand it to Dominator. Like I said, nothing beats the rush of chaining together boosts while near missing traffic, taking down others, driving into oncoming, whatever you need to do to make sure that your boost chain doesn't die. I'm sorry to gloss over this game so quickly, but Burnout Legends is more of the same in the risk and reward department. That's not to say the game is bad or anything. I think Legends is a solid racing game. For the PSP. I haven't played the DS version, but after watching some gameplay of it, I'm not exactly in a rush to try it out. Focusing back on the topic of risk and reward, there's nothing new. You can extend your boost gauge by performing takedowns, and you can maintain that boost by performing risky maneuvers on the roads. You can also use aftertouch once again to make sure that you don't lose any boost upon crashing. This brings us to the last entry for this video, Burnout Paradise. Burnout Paradise marks a significant change in the gameplay formula, specifically a transition from closed circuits to an open world. Not just in free roam, but in the events themselves. When you begin an event, it's entirely up to you on how to cross the finish line. There are no walls that force you to go down a certain predetermined path. This opens up the risk and reward element to include how you traverse the roads of Paradise City in events. Going off the beaten path for a potential shortcut in a race, taking an unconventional route to shield yourself in Marked Man, keeping a hold of that boost to keep the clock frozen while you get to an optimal spot during a stunt run, you get the idea. Risk and reward also comes into play when picking your car. In Paradise, the cars are split into 3 groups: stunt, aggression, and speed, which correlates to how their boosts work. Stunts can get their boosts from, well, stunts. Jumps, drifts, rolls, things like that. These cars are a jack of all trades in regard to their speed, durability, and mobility. Aggression cars get their boost from dominating their competition. Shunts, slams, grinding, takedowns, the whole shebang. Each takedown also extends your boost gauge, allowing you to boost for longer. These cars are usually less mobile, but they make up for that by having more durability. Speed cars utilize the boosting mechanic from Burnout 1, 2, and Dominator. You boost, perform risky maneuvers on the roads, and if you're risky enough, get burnout chains going. These cars specialize in speed and mobility, but they're much less durable as a result. Unfortunately, Paradise does slip up a little bit with the removal of aftertouch. When you crash, you can't control your wreckage. It forces you to watch your wreckage in a crash cam, which in my eyes is directly against the traditional formula for burnout crashes. It sucks being unable to do anything for a few seconds while you just sit there and watch, especially if a crash wasn't your fault. On the one hand, this does heighten the tension when you take risks for going after stuns, takedowns, and other things of the like, but on the other hand, when you inevitably crash, being unable to have a chance at recovering from that fumble does sting. That being said, not only is the risk and reward element still present in this game, Paradise is still a lot of fun on its own. What makes Burnout's absence all of these years later hurt even more is the fact that no arcade racing game has been able to achieve that perfect blend of risk and reward. Hell, even ex-Burnout developers haven't been able to recapture that magic. Three Fields Entertainment's try with 2019's Dangerous Driving was an attempt that fell flat, with the game feeling more like a dollar store Burnout 3. Three Fields Entertainment is taking another stab at it with Recreation, a sequel to Dangerous Driving, but whether they'll succeed in recapturing that magic has yet to be seen. Of course, not every racing game ever needs to be Burnout. I have days where I'm in the mood for something arcadey but still a bit grounded in reality like Need for Speed, or something that has a sim lean towards it with games like the Codemasters F1 titles. But then there are other days where I want to indulge in chaos, where I want to push things to the limit. I recognize that not every risk I take will give me a reward, but every single time a risk does pay off, I want to experience that high again and again. And no gaming franchise allows me to experience those highs better than Burnout.